All righty. Well, we're all here for a lot of many reasons. Number go up is always fun. Seeing all our friends is another. But to kick off the mining stage here in Vegas, I'm really excited to talk about revitalizing our rural communities. And I don't think there could be two leaders in our industry that could really, really represent those examples than the gentleman that we have here on stage. And so while I see how many familiar faces here, a lot of industry colleagues, I hope I see some people that maybe are new to the industry, and what they can take away from this conversation is how Bitcoin mining really connects to the America that their uncle lives in or that their cousins live in, right? So that's really what this conversation's about. My name is Gutierrez. I work with Giga Energy. I'm their cat herder, do all the business development across electrical infrastructure, and really excited to be here with Russ and Matt. I'll let them introduce themselves and their companies, and then we'll dive right into it. Gentlemen.
Hi guys, I'm Russell Cann. I'm the Chief Development Officer at Core Scientific, and I've been at Core from the beginning. Core operates sites in North Carolina, Georgia, Kentucky, Texas, Oklahoma, and North Dakota. We do a bit of Bitcoin mining, have been doing that for a while, and then we also have a lot of AI and HPC data centers in some of those states as well. And I'm excited to talk about this with Matt and talk about some of the rural revitalization that's happened to some of our sites around the country.
Thank you. My name is Matt Schulz. I'm the executive chairman and co-founder at CleanSpark. We're the largest hash rate provider in North America, in the United States, and the second largest publicly traded Bitcoin mining company overall. We operate 32 data centers in Mississippi, Georgia, Tennessee, and most recently Wyoming. And we've given some guidance to achieve about 50 exahash of processing power by this summer. So excited to be here. Looking forward to the chat.
Excellent. No, thank you, gentlemen. So as you've heard some of those states, those are states that maybe are, might have flown over to get here, right? That, you might associate with energy production, whether that's wind, solar, oil and gas. And that's where, we are building the hash rate here in the United States. To really kind of kick off this conversation, we're going to really explore how mining enters these communities. We're going to explore how we're working with them, how everybody can really benefit, and then we'll look out to the future after. Russ, I'll kick off the conversation with you, and we can pass it around to Matt as well. What does that first board meeting look like when you mention the word Bitcoin to a community board meeting?
So interesting enough, it's very different now. In 2017, I want to specifically talk about like our Marble data center, which is our first large-scale data center. In 2017, when we bought that property, no one even knew what it was, which is probably a good thing because we were able to actually get in there and build rapport with the community and get open. When China closed down Bitcoin mining, there was a big rush of Bitcoin mining in the States. I think it got a lot harder because unlike with CleanSpark and with Core Scientific, we have worked diligently to be good community partners. There was some that had not. So that really changed the conversations. So now when we go into a community and talk about Bitcoin mining, you have to go in there and talk about the negatives. That's the kind of questions you get because people think about only the negatives. Interesting enough, though, if you go to any of our communities where we operate now and we want expanded power or to expand, we've worked so hard to develop good relationships with the communities that they offer us additional power and they offer additional expansion opportunities. So, the town councils that really make a lot of these decisions, the loud citizens, they can really make a difference. In Cherokee County in North Carolina, there was another miner down the road that was really, keep saying really, they had a lot of noise pollution, and we did not. And it's hard not to get lumped into the same bucket. But interesting enough, that little town, because we had been there so long, was able to distinguish between our operations and those other operations. So I like to say it's changed over the years, but it's a conversation you have to have because there's a lot of negative connotations that come with Bitcoin mining, at least in the States right now.
Sure.
Yeah, so CleanSpark has always had the philosophy that we have a front door approach. A lot of Bitcoin mining companies have a bit of a negative reputation because oftentimes utility contracts and agreements are negotiated behind closed doors, and we've taken a completely different approach. And our methodology is that there are many of these small communities that when the utility grid was laid out 4, 5, 6 decades ago, they had industrial opportunities there. There was mining, there was manufacturing. And as we know, a lot of that industry in our country has been offshored. So we look at these small towns much the same as like Radiator Springs on the movie Cars, right? The freeway comes by and the town gets forgotten. Well, it's much the same in a lot of these communities, that when they laid out the grid, they had pockets of power available, and then the industry didn't consume them. So we become really the ideal partner for these communities. In most instances, we negotiate a fee that we buy power from the city, who is our utility. We pay their cost and we allow them to make a margin on that cost. So now the cities are deriving revenue from otherwise stranded assets. That starts to build up when you go from, 1 megawatt to 200 megawatts. Now it's meaningful. And in a lot of the places we do business, the sales tax stays in those communities where it's generated. So not only are we allowing these cities to buy power under the Costco model, they're buying more energy, so it drives the price down. But on top of that, the revenues generated from that and then the sales tax stay in the communities and improve the infrastructure. So bike paths and walking trails and splash pads. And, last quick point, one of the little communities that we do business in, the sales tax generated on our power bill created such a surplus that they had to find other places to allocate that. So they allocated it to property taxes in the community. So when you think about Bitcoin mining and a negative impact, we go into these communities, we lower the energy price, we employ a ton of people, we educate the workforce, we improve the community, and now we're actually pushing down property taxes in those jurisdictions. So we don't have a bunch of guys out looking for megawatts. Ours is the inverse. We get a lot of inbound inquiries saying, hey, what do I have to do to get you to send Scott over here and build one of those in my town?
Yeah, I'll add, and he made such a good point. 3 of our largest sites, one in North Carolina, one in Dalton, Georgia, one in Denton, Texas, the power utility company there is a local co-op. So their generation comes from Southern Company, or it comes from TVA, or it comes, in the case of Texas, it's just on the ERCOT grid. But we actually pay an override fee to that local co-op. And it's amazing how much of the budget we are. Like in the town, in Cherokee County, you can drive around the community, and it's a co-op. So it's co-op. I live in a co-op. I don't know if anybody else does, but you get a check every couple of years, because if there's any leftover monies in the co-op, it goes back to you, because the owners are the town citizens themselves. So the co-op folks in Cherokee County get a rebate. In Dalton, where the town actually owns the utility, so I think we have a little over 400 megawatts there now. Like, that's a huge piece of that budget for that town. And in Denton, Texas, is the same situation he just talked about. We started out 200 or 300 megawatts there. We're now up over 400 megawatts there, and we're a third or a quarter, somewhere between a third and a quarter of the entire town budget. And it's a huge difference for these little towns. And as Matt said, what it means is in each of those towns, at least in all 3 of those, actually, we actually increase capacity with nothing more than a conversation. And we like going back to the same place, because we already have infrastructure there, we already have clients there, we already have staff there. But in these towns, when they see the positive impact on their budgets, and they see the positive impact on their infrastructure, like in the co-ops, they actually are putting in new transmission line, putting in new substations, putting in new transformers. All that stuff makes their whole grid more efficient. They actually like us there. They really do. It's an amazing opportunity for us to expand our business because of that.
No, I appreciate that, gentlemen. And we'll pin the utility part of this conversation. We'll come back around there. Always, I'm sure, very curious for the audience. I'd love to really double click into the human and the people side of this here. I come from an oil and gas family. Very much remember when the booms and the busts. Had cousins kind of with nothing to do when oil goes south of 45. These are these same communities here. I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on kind of somewhat of a dual challenge. Number one, finding enough people to kind of partake in your guys' large-scale developments, right? You guys have both several hundred megawatts that are being built in these places, and also how do you attract those people as well? So how can you get them to stay, and how do you perhaps if they're coming out of high school, how can you prep them up to succeed as well? Don't know if you guys have any comments there in regarding to kind of the human capital that is in these communities.
A lot of these small towns, I grew up in a small town, Lander, Wyoming, and the town was decimated when U.S. Steel closed down a facility there. And many of these communities are the same way. And so when the jobs go away, what happens is kids graduate from high school and they have no choice but to leave. And when you bring these kind of opportunities into rural America, you get an opportunity for folks to go get an education, but then come back and be, support the family. We were talking backstage, Washington, Georgia, kind of a cool little facility that we have there. The town was named after the president of the country when it was organized. So it was founded in 1780. And most of the town is aging out, and it doesn't have there's not a lot of energy and enthusiasm. And when we went in there and committed to build, the town had 7 megawatts of power. We now operate 86 megawatts of power in this little town. Just to give you an idea of history, like when we signed the agreements for our with the economic development director, the historical plaque in their town hall indicates that building still exists, where the documents were signed that abolished the Confederacy. So these towns they know history, they know feast, and they know famine. And so to bring high-paying jobs, Bitcoin mining opportunities, mining technicians, but then we add another layer because we do repairs on all of our servers in-house. So now we're training people how to do repairs all the way down to the chip set in some of these remote rural towns. We create high-paying jobs. We attract people to come back home to support their original communities, and that reputation kind of precedes us. So when it comes time to go to the next town, and we both operate in Dalton, and both companies have kind of a reputation for being employee friendly, creating opportunities to grow and advance and be part of a high-tech workforce in a place that really time forgot for a period of time.
Yeah, and he hit on a couple of things I want to highlight. High-paying tech jobs in rural America. Politicians talk about that all the time, but we're actually doing it in the data center world. We're doing it in Bitcoin mining. We're doing it in AI. I hate to keep going on it, but it's the coolest little thing. Marble, North Carolina has 300 people live there. And there was a thread factory there that had been closed. It was built in the 60s. It had been closed down in the 80s, and it was closed throughout for 10 or 15 years. We come in, and in 2017, we turned into a Bitcoin mining operation. And in January of 18, we actually mined the first Bitcoin there on a large-scale piece. We've since emptied it out as a Bitcoin miner, and now it's filling up with 70 megawatts of GB200s, guys. We're building a $700 million data center in a town of 300 people. And we've retrained the workforce there. So we took folks that were coming out of high school and we trained them to be data center technicians on ASICs. And now they're being trained to work on the most sophisticated AI compute on the planet. Think about that. The AI compute is $50 million a megawatt, and we're deploying 70 megawatts worth there. So these little towns, high-paying jobs in rural America, and the folks that work in these towns, they love it. The town fathers and the town elders, they love the fact that the kids coming out of high school and in some cases college, they can come back to the town they grew up in. People love doing that. Most of the time they can't because the right kind of jobs are not there. So in the instances like Matt's talking about in their sites and some of our sites, we're in these tiny towns, but we're giving kids the opportunity, both high school and college, to come back to their hometown and stay and really make a difference. And I'll tell you what, when you start talking about a small rural southern town and someone making 6 figures, that's a lot of expendable income. And what that happens is, if you go and you go to downtown Murphy, there's a bunch of restaurants there that are thriving because just the 40 or 50 people we add to the payroll, but they all are making 3 times what the median family income is in the area, that's expendable income. And you guys follow economics. That's just a cycle. All that money gets cycled around in that little community. So it has a huge impact, a very real impact to these local communities. And that's why they like us there.
No, I appreciate that, gentlemen. It's one person starts to go spend, then somebody else opens up a restaurant, then their cousin then opens up a restaurant, and then now the main street looks very different than it did a couple of years ago. That's something that you don't have to be able to sign a transaction on the Bitcoin network, though we all should know how to do that. To really understand the impact of that in that regard. Let's take a moment to talk about, lessons that, some of our peers can take from your guys' experience. We may have some developers or some fellow miners in the audience. What are things that we can learn from and do right when we're going into a county for the first time. You guys mentioned that a utility that you have a good relationship is happy to allocate you more capacity. Sounds to me that if you're a good neighbor, they're going to continue to welcome you there. Would love to hear some examples of what are some things that we can avoid going forward, or some lessons that we can take from.
I think in CleanSpark's case, when we go in to build something, Sandersville, Georgia, we have 230 megawatts of power there in a town of 10,000 people. And so when we go in to build a facility, we have a team of guys that go in and work with the community leaders, with the economic development directors. So we task Scott Garrison's our COO, and he gets tasked to go into these towns. He's a relationship guy. I mean, he loves to golf. So Scott will go meet all the people, take them out golfing, explaining what we do, and then we build a plan. But what's really critical is when we build out these massive facilities, and like what Russ is talking about, we use all local trades. We don't import that. So whether it's the excavation team or the electricians or the guys that go vertical with construction, utilizing those local trades kind of spreads out that economic benefit, and it really endears you to these communities. Nobody wants you to come to their little town and bring in your own crew, make a mess, and then blast off. We actually monetize these towns on multiple different levels, and it creates relationships that, the excavator in one town may know somebody at a utility in another town and talk about the positive experience that they've had with us. So while we, obviously we've done a lot of branding here to kind of familiarize the Bitcoin community with CleanSpark, but what really has drawn us into many of these small communities is really word of mouth, just based on those experiences. So for us, it's a front door approach. It's being open and honest and transparent. It's about inviting the community leaders, economic development directors to visit existing sites. So you know what you're going to get, not just a rendering. You know what it sounds like. You know what it feels like. You know what the inputs and the outputs are. You get to meet with the employees and understand what their experience is like. And then what happens is they have a realistic expectation of what it's going to look like in their community. And when we do that and we're consistent and we keep our word, then it just spreads. And we've got opportunities that have continued to grow. I mean, it started in Georgia, it's spread to Tennessee, and now Wyoming. The opportunities there are endless. You got the 9th largest state by land mass, but dead last on population. So you've got all these opportunities to monetize power and benefit these communities, and it's really starting to gain some traction.
I would add too, if you're just getting into this, you need to be completely open book with the local town and the local utility company. If there's some economic incentive they have going on that only makes mining work because of that economic incentive, if it's costing them money, then it doesn't work long term. So you have to go in completely open book on what the economics of your business is and what the impact your business is going to have. So if you're using power 100% of the time, you can say, look, I'm using power 100% of the time. I'm turning on 100 megawatts in May. If it changes, you have to let them know, because these little local communities, as long as you go in there open book and you go in the front door and not try to come in the back door or under the porch, then it's going to establish the good long-term relationship, because you have to make it win-win. I'll give you an example. Like in Marble, we buy our generation's direct from TVA, but we pay them 1/10 of a penny override to ride on the local transportation. That's a very easy thing for the local co-op to figure out what their revenue is, right? They don't actually have risk of the generation. We're working with one of the largest utilities in America to figure out what the generation is and figure out what the curtailment is, so that the local co-op doesn't have to worry about the fact that if the nuke plant that TVA has to take down for maintenance, they call on us to do a curtailment for 12 hours. That's with us in TVA, but we work with the local co-op, and they know exactly what their piece is. So you don't want to try to take advantage of some rebate or some kind of tax program or something that's local without explaining the impact you're going to have on the utility grid and the local community, because otherwise your relationship's good for a year or two, maybe even just a wintertime or a summertime, depending on what environment you're in. And as soon as it hits the fan with that utility because you weren't able to perform like you thought you were, or you performed differently than what they thought you were, then the relationship can sour. And once it sours, it's very hard to solve those problems. So go in there completely open book and understand your business. Also, if you're just getting into this, start off small. Don't go in and try to boil the ocean. Go in there and get your 1 or 2 megawatts up and running, and make sure you do it right first. Because if you go in there trying to boil the ocean and you never boiled the ocean before, you could really mess things up, and it'll ruin your relationship with that town or that local utility.
And you know, another layer to that, when you talked about the interruptible load, Bitcoin really is the perfect partner for a grid. It allows the utility to overbuild capacity without having to worry about energy storage or running that power to ground, because we'll buy it whenever it's available. And then we can make the economic decision to discontinue to buy when prices go up or difficulty is up or down. So, but a third kind of benefit is that we build more robust infrastructure in these small towns. And so when there's an event, like, for example, everybody saw what happened with Hurricane Helene a couple of years ago. Washington, Georgia, the main 7 megawatt substation in that town was taken out by a hurricane. So now the hospital, the schools, all these critical loads are interrupted. Well, we built more robust infrastructure and substations. We had the opportunity and the ability to quickly curtail that load and to push the power back. So it was literally a blink. And many towns throughout the southeastern United States were without power for an extended period of time. Noticeably different or exempt from that list were the communities with Bitcoin miners, because Bitcoin miners can shut down. That power goes back to where it's most critically needed, and they can continue operations, and we gradually ramp back up our production as the infrastructure was repaired and brought back online. So when that happens, people in the community see it, have that experience, know that it's a trusted partner, and it really does advance relationships.
No, I think that's a great example of a real life benefit, right, of having these flexible loads near your community. I'd love to kind of look forward into the future. Russ, you mentioned, having, the town of 300 people, now starting to, build and work with like the most cutting edge GPUs that exist. Do these young people, men and women, understand that they're powering all of Silicon Valley right now?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, and they do, and it's pretty fun because you guys know this. Core Scientific, we're converting a lot of our Bitcoin mining. We still have Bitcoin mining in West Texas and Kentucky, but we're converting a lot of our Bitcoin mining sites into AI sites. And two things happen there. One, just like I mentioned, you have to go in there with a front door. A base load for AI is very different from the base load of Bitcoin mining. All those good things that he just talked about with Bitcoin mining, as far as your power base, and you can tell it, you can't do that with an AI load. The flip side, though, is true when you have a conversation with a co-op and you say, I know I've been paying you 2 or 3 cents, but I can pay you 8. And I'll do it in 2 years. That gives them enough time to say, wait a minute, okay, let's figure this out. So again, you have to go in there with a front door. But to answer your question, yes. And interesting enough, the kids are enjoying it. And I say they're kids because they're a lot younger than I am. But like, it's amazing to think that a textile factory became a Bitcoin miner, and now it's going to be an AI supercomputer for Google and OpenAI and all those kind of things. Or in Denton, it's well known, guys. OpenAI, the first Stargate project for OpenAI is actually our Denton site. I think other people are talking about other sites, but we actually turned on 8 megawatts this month, and we turned on like 40 megawatts next month. Sam Altman's training his next models there. So like that site there was empty. It was a nat gas plant, then became a Bitcoin miner, and now it's going to become, at the end of this year, the largest supercomputer on the planet. It'll have 262 megawatts of GB200s running. I can't tell you how amazing that is. But it's the exact same data center technicians that come out of the colleges there in Denton that train to be data center repair technicians on the repair boards, ASIC repair boards, that are now going to be data center technicians working in those AI supercomputer centers. Now, there's different training that has to happen, but they go through that training and they love it. I mean, they absolutely enjoy it.
No, I appreciate that. Matt, on the Bitcoin lens, looking into the future, you're mentioning TVA, Wyoming, lots of, other data centers are looking to these places. How are you looking to kind of engage with the utilities? Do they come to you because you're a flexible load, because you've put the proof of work to build out to several hundred megawatts? Are you somewhat of like a resource when, X AI developer wants to come and put some certain proposal in front of them? Are you some of a partner to them now after building so much?
Yeah, so we're a different proposition than what Russ is talking about. There are communities that have stranded power that they're looking to monetize today. Cheyenne, Wyoming is a good example. We were bidding for 85 megawatts of power there. And the utility ultimately had the decision: do I go with CleanSpark or do I go some other way? And the other customer happened to be a hyperscaler.
Yeah.
The challenge is that a hyperscaler, from the time they scrape the dirt and start to go vertical, it may be 3 years before the community is monetizing those megawatts. So even if it's at a premium, oftentimes the incentive for a community, and in our case in Cheyenne, was we're going to pick the Bitcoin miner, and we signed an agreement in July. And by December, we were buying those megawatts and creating a material impact on the revenue profile of that community. So we're seeing these continued invitations. Not that there's not massive opportunities for the AI side, but we look at many of the small towns that we're being invited in. They have these pockets of power, but maybe they're 200 or 300 or 400 miles from a major metropolitan area. So in an AI application, latency becomes a challenge. So it's less appealing other than for edge compute. And then they can't demand that 8 or 10 cents that Russ is talking about. So there's a perfect opportunity for collaboration, for Bitcoin miners to work together with AI. But we've remained, and I think we're the only remaining pure play Bitcoin miner, because of the fact that by increasing our efficiency, focusing on really key metrics, we can afford to pay a bit more for power than most other miners can, because we have higher uptime and greater efficiency. So it becomes more of a win-win with the communities, and as a result, the demand is less. We don't have, a checklist of, if we're going to come here, we need, reliability, uptime to the, fifth decimal point. We're a much more flexible partner. And so we're seeing continued pull through for demand for Bitcoin mining in areas that may be adjacent to high performance compute, and also may be not a good candidate for HPC.
Oh, no.
I'll just one thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just because it's interesting.
Yeah.
He mentioned something that's super important too. Like when the hyperscaler or big AI companies coming in, it's years. I mean, it's a lot different data center build. One of the reasons we were able to get some of our communities to give us more power and work with us is because we're still Bitcoin mining all the way up until the time we turn on the AI GPUs. Dalton's a good example of that. We're building the data center adjacent to the Bitcoin mining site. It's right beside it. But we're actually work with the utility to say, look, we're going to Bitcoin mine all the way up, because that's super important. I just told you we're in these long-term relationships with these communities. If we go in and turn off their entire revenue stream, it would decimate a little town. So in every single instance, we tried to work with the community to say, look, we're going to Bitcoin mine all the way up until the very last minute when we can flip it over, because we have such an impact on the budgets.
Yeah, and every megawatt hour counts for these communities, right? Whether it's Bitcoin, whether it's other applications, just having that acknowledgement is super important. Gentlemen, we're coming up here on time. I really want to thank you for your discussion and participation today. Key takeaways for me, this is a relationship, it's a partnership, right? This is not transactional. Be open book, right? And really emphasize the positives, right? Technology, jobs, tax base. This is why we're here. Everybody, please give a round of applause to Russ and Matt.